anyways, let's get into the message this morning. A message that I simply entitled Boring. Okay, and this is something I want to talk about because here's my belief. Anything you do in life will always become boring, including your Christianity. All right, now follow me on this. I think this is a solid statement. Have you ever met somebody who had a hobby? Okay, woodworking, photography, and they had this inkling saying, I could do this for a living. And so they pursue that as their living. What happens to the fun of that hobby when it becomes their living?
It's a drag.
It becomes boring. Yeah, a drag. It's something that they don't like to do anymore. In Christianity, a lot of us have been in this thing for years, decades. I'm not talking just Radiantfellowship. All the churches in our city, we're the church, okay? You won't hear me badmouth one church from the pulpit. In fact, we regularly pray for other churches. What I'm saying is, a lot of us have been in Christianity for a long time. And when you're in something for a long time, it has a tendency to be boring. It can get boring. It can become these things. The most exciting things in the world can become boring if we let them. You see, Hunter Thompson, he wrote a book called The Proud Highway, Saga of a Desperate Southern Gentleman. And it was written in, I think, 1955. He says, life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride.
Amen.
I'm going to propose it to read this. Life should not be a journey to the grave with intentions of arriving safely in an attractive and well-preserved body, but rather to skid sideways into heaven, body thoroughly used up, and happily shouting, what a ride, Jesus, what a ride. Okay, and I think that's what Christianity is all about. Rich Mullins in one of his videos says, he said, somebody came up to me the other day and said, I'm praying for you. And he looked at the camera and goes, does it look like I need it? And he's just, just worn out looking. He goes, I use my body as much as I can for the gospel of Jesus Christ. In other words, he doesn't say no to a lot of things and outreaches and ministry opportunities. This guy had a full-time CCM career, contemporary Christian music career, and he also started a ministry on the Navajo Reserve down in the southwest area of the United States. And so he was constantly being used, and he was somebody who passed away in a Jeep accident, and I believe when he got to heaven, he said, what a ride, Jesus, what a ride. You see, our philosophy for impacting our world should be summed up in 3 words. Now, here's a picture I want to show you from yesterday. This is a picture where we look back on life and say, what a ride it's been. These guys here, have you been to Milwaukee lately? Have you been to Milwaukee? Have you eaten at a pizzeria called Balistreri's? Okay, it's on 68th and right between Wells and up from State Street. A very known well restaurant, and this is a restaurant that a lot of people, families go to when they're down there. There's Balistreri's Blue Mountain Inn. This is where the Milwaukee Bucks eat and everything. And then there's the original Balistreri's Pizza right in the Wauwatosa, Milwaukee area. Well, yesterday I got to do the wedding for my friend right here, Mario Balistreri. And this is his dad, Jim Balistreri, who owns those pizza places. You see, dialing it back a few years, after the wedding, Jim Balistreri, the guy on the right, he goes, I'm so excited because little Bobby Adams did the wedding. That's the second time this year that name's come back to bite me. The first time was a month ago at our district summit for the Assemblies of God. And my pastor is now the district superintendent for the Assemblies of God. He's sitting on the stage in front of all of the AG body, and something needed to be done. He looks right at me and goes, Bobby, would you mind doing that? I'm like, you did not just do that. And so I'm going back. I go back there, and the sound guy's like, hey, Bobby. I was like, oh, okay. And Regina uses it regularly now. So, but anyways, it was neat because Mario and I are the same age. We got to be friends when we were 5 years old, okay? He had a marriage that kind of struggled and then ultimately ended in divorce, and he found somebody new and just a great group together, and he asked me if I'd be willing to do the ceremony all these years later at this little chapel in Milwaukee that I posted on Facebook yesterday. And it's interesting because I can look back on that and say, what a ride that's been. Mario and I, the little 5-year-olds, and then ultimately we became teenagers, and we did our skateboard thing. We built a quarter pipe in his yard, and we would skate down whenever we had money. We'd go down to Screamin' Tuna skate shop in the Tosa Village and buy stickers. We even built our own board once. All of these things. And ultimately, he said to me about a year ago, he goes, when I get remarried, I want you to do my wedding. They're a very strong Catholic family, but at the same time, he goes, I so respect who you are and what you've become. And that says a lot about our Christianity, about my Christianity. You see, our philosophy as Christians for impacting our world should be summed up in 3 words. And that's simply, let me see if I can pull it up. I don't have it up there, but I'll just share it with you. Vision plus endurance equals conquest. Our philosophy for impacting our world should be summed up in 3 words. Vision, okay, where do you want to go? What do you want to become? What are your goals? What are your dreams? This is something we ask ourselves as high school graduates as well. I had a lot of things I wanted to become. My first passion ever was to become a park ranger. Okay, that's just what I wanted to become. Ranger Bob. It has a nice ring to it. Come on. Anything really has a nice name to it when you put Bob at the end. Janitor Bob, Sideshow Bob, all of these things. Okay, and so I wanted to become a ranger. I knew I had to go to UWSP, take their program, and then my cousin Greg, Renee's brother, drove semi, and I'm like, this is my new calling in life. I sat up in that semi when he drove for TransStar in front of Waupun Assembly. I don't know what the ordeal was, but he brought his semi there, and I crawled up there. I'm like, this is my lot in life to become. And he shared with me a bag of boiled peanuts that he got in Georgia, and I gagged on them, but I knew that this is what I wanted to become. Have you had a boiled peanut before?
Yes.
Peanuts should not be soggy and salty, okay? But that's what I wanted to become. Then I wanted to become a graphic designer. That was going places. I had scholarships lined up, Cardinal Stritch. But then all of a sudden, I looked at my life and I said, I want to go into ministry. Why? What defining moment did I have? I had a youth pastor that I thought was really cool. He had a heart for ministry, he had a heart for outreach. And it's then that I had a vision for it. But a vision is going to go nowhere unless you have endurance to finish it out. So you want to choose this path? Well, now you're going to have to get some college, you're going to have to get some education and all that. That's the endurance, because that equals conquest. And when we hit that point, that's where we want to be. You see, God gives all of us a sphere of influence. In other words, he gives all of us people that we influence, either positive or that we either positively or negatively for Christ. God gives all of us a sphere of influence. This was a concept that was written back years ago in a book called the Prayer of Jabez. But in other words, he gives all of us people that we influence either positively or negatively for Christ. How you use that influence helps determine what kind of Christianity you will have. If your Christianity is casual, your Christianity may be boring. There's a book in the Bible that I want to focus on this morning called Esther. Okay, we should be familiar with the story of Esther. This story is anything but casual Christianity. Because when our Christianity does become casual, as I said, it's boring. What are you doing? What am I doing? Why waste our time on a beautiful Sunday morning coming to church if you're bored with Christianity? This should be something that should be furthest from us. We all go through those moments. I've gone through those moments. But as a whole, it should not be boring. It should be anything but boring. If you don't make a positive decision, it's always going to go negative. You see, with Christianity, with life in general, there's a good life lesson that anything you compromise to gain, you will eventually lose. You see, Mordecai gave Esther some great advice in Esther 4:14. He says, "Who knows, Esther? Jehovah has perhaps brought you into this kingdom for such a time as this." You see, this whole story of Esther is a Jewish girl. King Xerxes was looking for a new partner. And Scripture speaks very highly of the looks and the demeanor of Esther, and that everywhere she went, guys were smitten by how she looked, how she carried herself, and King Xerxes ultimately chose her. Well, Mordecai, her father, sat outside the gates and he foiled some plans that two of the guards had, and those two guards were ultimately punished. But Haman, he passed another law that simply said all Jewish people need to die, because he started seeing things happening, and this guy Mordecai outside of the gates would not bow to him. Mordecai is Esther's daughter. Esther is now the king's wife, and she is a Jewish lady, but that hasn't been revealed yet. Mordecai has said, do not tell King Xerxes that you are a Jewish woman. All of these things started happening. Haman got a law passed, and we know the story. Ultimately, Esther went before Xerxes and said, I have to petition you. And I think the first time she went, it was with hesitancy, a lot of hesitancy. So she asked them to come back to another meal, and that's when she told the plans of Haman, revealed who she was, and ultimately, as Scripture so eloquently puts it, he was impaled. That Haman was impaled for this. But you see that there comes a moment in our life that God brings you to a point for a reason. That God has a plan for you for a reason. And the best laid plans in life are those of God, because, as I said earlier, anything you compromise, anything I compromise to gain, I and you will eventually lose it. You may have seen that in your own life. I know I've seen that in my life. You try to cut corners, you try to do things, and you end up losing what you tried to gain in your own strength and your own possibility. Esther was at this moment of crisis in her life. And what's interesting is that in the Chinese language, and I saw a documentary on Japan last night called Godzilla. Just joking. It was an awesome movie. The people that took the ticket didn't understand that joke either, so don't worry about it. They were all young kids. But anyways, they said, what movie? I said, Godzilla. And they're like, what? I said, Godzilla. I'm sorry. I was referring back to the old black and white movies. But anyways, the Chinese ideogram, the Chinese logo for crisis, it also represents responsibility and danger. In other words, crisis in our lives is a time of possible danger, which comes with our own personal responsibility to respond. So when we're hit with the crisis of Christianity being boring, well, let me ask you the question, what are you doing to get it a little more exciting? What are you doing to rev it up a little bit? Because quite honestly, if all I do is go to church, and I don't have a devotional life, I don't try to live the life, I don't dream about outreaches, I don't dream about other things, I'm spinning my wheels. It's boring. And I don't need more boring in my life. I want this thing to be exciting. I want this to be vibrant. You should want this thing to be exciting and vibrant. Because if I just go to church or I just post Christian memes all the time on Facebook, I'm going to wear out. I'm going to become very bored with life. Boring? It shouldn't be. Absolutely not. The reason many of us have a boring Christianity is because we play it too safe. Let me say that again. The reason why Christianity is boring to a lot of people is because we play it too safe. I'll throw this on the screen. Every conquest, which is vision and endurance equals conquest, every conquest in your life will involve some sort of Haman. This guy who is going to try to foil your plans. This thing, this purpose that's going to try to foil your plans. And as a resulting risk, you will have to be willing to take. Are you willing to take a risk for something that God's laid on your heart to do? Esther was confronted with this. She had to confront King Xerxes with a message that, quite honestly, she didn't know if it was going to turn out good or bad, because Xerxes could have either listened to her or he could have done away with her because she came into the king's courts. But no matter what we do, no matter what God's called us to do, it's going to come with risks. And quite honestly, it's going to come with a lot of reasoning in our mind. I know I should probably be doing this. I should get involved with this. I should volunteer for the neighborhood party. But on It's my only weekend off. I don't want to work with more kids. I don't need to do this. I want to keep me. I want to do what I want to do. You see, Haman was the number 2 guy in the kingdom, next to King Xerxes. He hated the Jews big time, and he was determined to destroy them. So as I said, he put a plot to kill all the Jews inside the king's head. He started speaking this into King Xerxes' head. Still without the king knowing that his wife Esther was a Jew herself. You see, as we learn from Haman, some people act like they hate you because they're simply jealous of you. Because you have things going on in your life. You're pursuing goals, you're pursuing dreams, you're doing things for Christ, and people look at you and like, I really don't like you. There are people that get annoyed when other people are happy. There are people that will look at pictures of other people's vacation. And back in the 80s and 70s, if you were looking at other people's pictures of vacation, that was called a punishment. Okay? But now on Facebook, we like doing that. We like doing that kind of stuff. And Carol, look at this picture. And you're like, no, I don't want to. But there are people that literally get irritated when someone they know is happy. And this is what's going on in this story, is that Haman is coming down and saying, this thing isn't going to happen. This Mordecai needs to go. This Queen Esther, she needs to go, and he's going to do everything he can to destroy it. And other people that act like they dislike you because, why? Because they're insecure with their own selves. They're insecure with who they are. And so they try to throw a wrench in your works when you're excited about life. When we're, as a Christian, we ought to be around people that are excited about doing things. Excited about seeing their own life encouraged, their own life building up, and how they can share that. We should get jazzed when we see a kids camp, for one of 2 reasons. Number one, it's a great opportunity for your kids to grow in Christ, make friends. And number 2, it's a week without your kids. I didn't say that out loud. But it's an awesome opportunity. We should get excited about these things. We should be drawn to those things. But we always face those Hamans in life. Those things that try to bring us down. Those things that try to discourage us. So my question is, what or who is your Haman? I think that's a valid question. What or who is your Haman? What has brought you down? What is trying to get you down? I hear people say, well, that church hurt me. No. I could easily say that building, that church down in Milwaukee hurt me. And the fact is, we refer to churches as buildings, and I could honestly say, no, that church didn't hurt me. I guarantee you, because a brick didn't fall out of the building and conk me in the head, none of that. Somebody hurt me. That church didn't hurt me. Somebody in that church hurt me. And until we identify who or what that is, it's difficult to move on to find healing. So I ask that question, what or who is your Haman? Esther knew exactly what her problem was and what she needed to do. Mordecai knew exactly what was going on, what was holding him back, and what needed to be done. In our own life, if our life is going through the doldrums and we're bored and we're just doing this Christianity thing, what or who is holding you back from going up to the next step? The life, the zeal, the passion you had once when you'd see a new ministry opportunity come up, where is that gone? What has become of our lives? The day we got saved and we gave our heart to Christ, we were excited, we were jazzed, we wanted to do a lot of things, and then life came along and maybe kicked that right out of us. What or who did that to you? When we can address that issue, and not just recognize it, but deal with it, we're going to see our life go on to the next level and we're going to get excited again. It's kind of like before service we were playing Christian music videos, and you'll see that every week now. In fact, in weeks to come, we're going to have a Christian music lending library with a lot of the latest stuff where you can actually check out the CD for a week and enjoy it and bring it back. It'll be a constant rotating library. But Teresa and I were talking about that. You know, the fact is that in the morning when I put on Christian radio, which honestly doesn't happen a whole lot more these days, it's difficult to get in the car and have some good drive music, get excited when it's all the songs. That's the best way I can describe it. Okay? Just like worn down, beat down. There's a group out there, and I won't say the name or anything, but there's a group out there that sings Living He Loved Me, Dying He Saved Me, Buried He Carried My Sins Far Away, but Rising I'll Justify. And I'm like, you destroyed this song. Okay? You killed the song. If you want to hear the song how it's supposed to be sung, YouTube Donnie McClurkin, Living He Loved Me, Dying He Saved Me. That's something you can shake your holy booty to. Okay? And you can get going with. And that's going to encourage you that you're going to just like drive down the road 80 miles an hour to get to school because you are so encouraged. You know, we need to identify what's pulling you down. That was a lighthearted example, but what in your life is pulling you down? You need to address it. And sometimes, I'll even go this far as to say, you need to have a self-kick system. Because if you're not willing to share what's going on in your life, you need to kick yourself out of that mode. And realize that God wants to use you in an awesome way, but you got to deal with that Haman in your life. You see, in Esther 8:4, the king, it says, and then the king held out his scepter to Esther. In other words, I will grant your request. Esther was full of fear. It took multiple meetings with Haman and King Xerxes before she actually came forward. And when she did, the king instantly dealt with Haman. The very device that Haman was going to use to kill Mordecai, the king used on on Haman. When we become open and real with God on what our hang-ups are, and I'm talking from experience here, the king deals with it swiftly. And we will see our Christianity come to a new vibrant life. The next level, if I can say that. So the question is, what is your Haman? Or who is your Haman? You may think that you are only one person, but the King of the universe holds out this scepter to you this year so the people in your sphere of influence will not be eternally lost. Should this thing be called Christianity be boring? Absolutely not. As a church, we do our part to provide opportunities to do outreach and to have fellowship events. The Rock, we did it last week. It was a low turnout. Maybe it was because of the holiday, but we did it. We went out. A lot of you donated food, you clothes, all of that stuff. We have our neighborhood outreach party. If you've never been to one of these, you don't know the joy it is to have a bounce house over here, a grill over here, and see kids literally walking through the backyards to get to this place. They could care less when the grill's going, but when they see that bounce house go up, game on. Okay? You know, the fact of the matter is, the week before, we could all be doing a little something extra, whatever we want for ourselves. But we could take also a half hour and stretch ourselves and say, yeah, I'll go door to door and hand out leaflets to invite our neighborhood to this party. You see, we have to break out of the mundane. And I realize when something's mundane, if we do it over and over again, it becomes our life. There comes a point where you have to say, I'm not doing this anymore. I need to get back involved again. And if not in the church, then out there somewhere. I get bored doing things in the church. I'm just going to admit it as your pastor. So I need to do things outside of the church. That's why I coach softball. That's why I'm at my kids' school doing things. That's why I get involved where I can. That's why when Noah finally is off to full-time school, I'm not trying to rush it. A little bit. But I'm just, okay, I plan on joining Rotary because I want to do things out there as well. Is it comfortable? No. Rotary, you know what time they meet? 6:30 in the morning. I don't like that. But I want to be a part of something like that. So we have to shake it off. Should this thing be boring? Absolutely not. Here's a true story for you from Notre Dame basketball team in the 70s as they went to the NCAA playoffs. In the 1970s, the Notre Dame basketball team made it to the NCAA championship. Their coach named Digger Phelps. There was only one problem with making it to the NCAA championships when they did. They were matched up with the UCLA Bruins. Up to this point, the Bruins were a basketball dynasty. They had won 88 straight basketball games. Obviously, a matchup with the Bruins was almost an automatic loss before they ever started the game. Digger Phelps knew his team needed to do more than practice. He needed to give them the faith to begin to know that they could win, to be willing to say, we can do this. The greatest thing that the enemy can use against many of us is to remember who we were last year. You see, for some of us, in fact, it wasn't anything too Christian. You see, Digger Phelps needed to give them a vision of who they could be and that they could beat the Bruins. So what he did was he worked it into the practice regime. Every night they would practice at the end, and at the end of the practice, he would tell them, gentlemen, we can beat those guys on Saturday night and just need help. You know how much I know that. At the very end of every one of our practices, we're going to practice what it feels like to win. So Digger Phelps would have them pull out a ladder, climb the victory ladder, and cut down the basketball net. This was something they practiced every night. That's what victors do. They go up and they cut down the net from the championship game that they won. Monday night after they practiced, Digger Phelps called for the ladder. They brought it in. He had the point guard go up and cut down the net. Then he said, put me on your shoulders and scream and yell in victory. All the way to the locker room. Just go crazy like we won. So they did. Can you imagine that at a practice every night? Tuesday night they practiced and did it all over again. He had somebody else climb the ladder, cut down the basketball net, then they lifted him up and carried him off again. Wednesday, Thursday, and one last time on Friday. I'm sure the guys probably tried to make light of it at some point, but Digger Phelps would have nothing of them making light of it because he understood that we really tend to live whatever our faith dream is of ourselves. He knew that vision plus endurance equals conquest. So Saturday night they hit the floor for the NCAA championship, and the miraculous happened. There was not an 89th victory in a row for the Bruins. Notre Dame took them. At the end, the commentators were going crazy, and they interviewed the point guard and a few of the team right after they had cut down the nets for real. One of the interviewers asked the point guard, UCLA won 88 times in a row. Were you surprised at the final score? The point guard looked at him and said, no, I really wasn't. We practiced hard all week. But he said, at the end of every practice, the coach gave us vision. He explained how the coach pulled out the ladder and they cut down the basketball net. He said, so tonight when we hit the floor, we honestly believed that if we were willing to fight for it hard enough, that it was going to be different because we were going to win. You see, when Walt Disney built Disney World, there was a huge part of it he never experienced. And someone asked, what do you think he would have thought of this? And his right-hand person said, he was already here. You got to practice it. And so what are you believing for? Start practicing the victory. Start watching it happen in your own life. This thing called Christianity cannot and should not be boring. It comes with risks, it comes with perseverance, but it should not be boring.